The evening sun was just beginning to set when Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres turned onto Maple Street, heading home after another long day at the naval base. She'd been up since 4 that morning, running combat drills and training exercises with her unit. All she wanted now was a hot shower and maybe some leftover pizza from the fridge. Rachel had been driving this same route for 3 years, ever since she'd been stationed at the base. She knew every turn, every stop sign, every speed limit. Tonight was no different. She kept her silver sedan at exactly 30 miles per hour, just like the posted signs indicated. The radio played softly in the background, some old jazz tune her father used to love. In her rearview mirror, she noticed the police cruiser. It had been following her for about 2 blocks now, staying a consistent distance behind. Rachel didn't think much of it at first. Cops patrolled this neighborhood regularly, but then she saw the lights flash on. Her heart sank a little, the way it always did in these situations. Rachel pulled over to the curb, careful to use her turn signal and come to a complete stop. She rolled down her window, placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen, and waited. The officer who approached her car was a white man, probably in his early 40s with a thick neck and a permanent scowl etched into his face. His nameplate read Officer D. Harrison. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how her evening was going. He just stood there, one hand resting on his duty belt, staring down at her. "License and registration," he demanded, his voice flat and cold. "Of course, officer," Rachel replied, keeping her tone polite and even. "They're in my glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now." She moved slowly, deliberately, making sure every action was visible. She'd been trained in high-pressure situations where one wrong move could mean life or death. This felt uncomfortably similar, even though she was just a citizen on a suburban street. Officer Harrison snatched the documents from her hand without a thank you. He studied them for a long moment, his eyes flicking between her license and her face. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" he asked. Rachel thought carefully before answering. "No, sir, I don't. I was going the speed limit and following all traffic laws." The officer's jaw tightened. "You were speeding. Clocked you at 45 in a 30 zone." Rachel felt a flash of confusion. She knew for certain she hadn't been speeding. She'd been watching her speedometer the entire drive the way she always did. But she also knew that arguing on the side of the road rarely went well. "I don't believe I was speeding, officer, but if you say so," she said carefully. "Are you calling me a liar?" Harrison's voice rose slightly. "No, sir. I'm just saying I was watching my speed and I don't think I was going that fast. Step out of the vehicle." Rachel's stomach dropped. This was escalating fast and she wasn't sure why. But she complied, opening her door slowly and stepping out onto the sidewalk. She was wearing jeans and a simple blue t-shirt, nothing threatening or unusual. She stood with her hands visible, not making any sudden movements. "You got a problem with authority?" Harrison asked, moving closer to her, invading her personal space. "No, sir. I respect law enforcement. I just want to understand why I'm being pulled over." "I told you why. You were speeding and driving recklessly, swerving all over the road." Now Rachel knew something was very wrong. She hadn't swerved once. She'd been driving in a straight line down a residential street. Her 15 years of military training kicked in, and she made a quick decision. She needed to document this. "Officer, I'd like to record this interaction for both of our protection," she said, slowly reaching for her phone in her back pocket. "Don't you dare," Harrison barked, stepping even closer. "You pull that phone out and I'll arrest you for obstruction." Rachel froze. She knew her rights. She knew civilians were allowed to record police interactions in public, but she also knew that this situation could turn dangerous very quickly if she pushed too hard. "I'm just trying to protect both of us," she said calmly. "A recording shows the truth of what happens here. The truth is you're being difficult and uncooperative. Now I'm going to ask you one more time. Have you been drinking tonight?" "What?" "No, I haven't had anything to drink." "Your eyes look red. You seem agitated. I think you might be under the influence." Rachel couldn't believe what she was hearing. She wasn't agitated until this officer started making false accusations. Her eyes were probably tired from 14 hours of work, but she certainly wasn't drunk or high. "I'm not under the influence of anything, officer. I'm just tired from work." "What kind of work you do?" Harrison asked, his tone suggesting he already didn't believe whatever she might say. Rachel hesitated. She could tell him she was a Navy SEAL, a high-ranking officer who'd served in combat zones around the world. She could mention that she had top-secret security clearance and had received commendations from admirals. But something told her to keep that information to herself. She wanted to see how this would play out, wanted to be treated like any other civilian. "I work at the base," she said simply. "Doing what? Secretarial work?" The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Rachel bit back her first response and simply said, "I'm in the Navy." Harrison smirked. "Sure you are. Let me guess, you're a SEAL too, right?" He said it like it was the funniest joke he'd heard all week. Rachel didn't respond. She just stood there, maintaining her composure while this officer mocked her. "All right, here's what's going to happen," Harrison said, pulling out his citation book. "I'm writing you up for reckless driving, speeding, and since you've been so difficult, I'm adding failure to comply with a lawful order." "I've complied with every order you've given me," Rachel protested. "That's not how I see it. You've been argumentative and disrespectful from the moment I pulled you over." Rachel knew this was pointless. Nothing she said would change this officer's mind. He'd already decided how this was going to go. So she stood there silently while he wrote out multiple citations, each one based on things that hadn't actually happened. When he handed her the papers, he leaned in close. "You've got a court date in 3 weeks. I suggest you show up with a better attitude than you have tonight. And maybe dress appropriately this time." Rachel looked down at her casual clothes, confused by the comment. What was wrong with what she was wearing? "Can I have my license and registration back?" she asked. Harrison tossed them at her carelessly, and she had to catch them before they fell to the ground. "One more thing," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My phone. I had it in my hand when you told me not to record. That's evidence now. I'm confiscating it as part of my report. You'll get it back eventually." "Evidence of what?" "I didn't commit any crime. You were attempting to obstruct my investigation. That phone stays with me." Rachel felt helpless. Her phone had everything on it. Work contacts, personal photos, important messages. But more importantly, it had started recording before Harrison noticed. She'd hit the record button the moment he'd begun making false accusations. That recording was now in his possession. "I need that phone for work," she tried one more time. "Should have thought about that before you decided to be difficult. Now get back in your car and drive away before I add another citation." Rachel got back in her vehicle, her hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from controlled anger. She started the engine and pulled away carefully, watching Harrison in her rearview mirror. He stood there on the sidewalk writing something in his notebook, probably adding more false details to whatever report he was going to file. As she drove home, Rachel's mind raced. She'd been in firefights. She'd jumped out of planes in the middle of the night. She'd led teams through dangerous missions in hostile territory, but nothing had made her feel quite as powerless as what had just happened on this quiet suburban street. When she finally pulled into her driveway, she sat in the car for a long moment, trying to process everything. Then she remembered something that made her smile slightly despite the situation. Her car had a dash cam. She'd installed it 2 years ago after a friend's car had been hit in a parking lot. The camera ran continuously whenever the car was on, recording both video and audio. Everything that had just happened was recorded. Every lie Officer Harrison had told. Every false accusation. Every illegal confiscation of her property. It was all there, saved to a memory card hidden behind her rearview mirror. Rachel finally got out of the car and went inside. She had 3 weeks until her court date. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to decide how she wanted to handle this. She could reveal who she really was, use her rank and position to make this go away quickly, or she could fight this the way any ordinary citizen would have to fight it. As she looked at the citations spread out on her kitchen table, all listing violations she hadn't committed, Rachel made her decision. She would fight this properly. She would show up to court and let Officer Harrison dig himself deeper into whatever hole he was creating, because if he was willing to lie this easily about her, a person who'd done nothing wrong, how many others had he done this to? She picked up her laptop and started documenting everything she could remember. Every detail of the stop, every word Harrison had said. Tomorrow she'd pull the dash cam footage and make backup copies. She'd also contact a lawyer, get proper representation. But tonight she just needed to write it all down while it was fresh in her mind. Officer Harrison had made a serious mistake. He'd lied about the wrong person. And Rachel was going to make sure the truth came out. The next morning, Rachel sat in her kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the traffic stop in her mind, analyzing it the way she'd been trained to analyze combat situations. What had she done wrong? Nothing as far as she could tell. But that didn't seem to matter. Her first call was to her lawyer friend Patricia Chen, who specialized in civil rights cases. They'd met years ago at a community event, and Patricia had always told Rachel to call if she ever needed help. Well, now she needed help. "Let me get this straight," Patricia said after Rachel finished explaining everything. "He pulled you over for no reason, made up multiple violations, confiscated your phone illegally, and now you've got 3 citations you didn't earn?" "That's exactly what happened." "And you have dashcam footage of the whole thing?" "Every second of it." "Audio and video." Patricia let out a low whistle. "Okay, here's what we do. First, don't talk to anyone about this except me. Second, make multiple copies of that footage and store them in different places. Cloud storage, hard drives, everything. Third, we file a formal complaint with the department. And fourth, we prepare for court." "What are my chances?" Rachel asked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Honestly? If it was just your word against his, I'd say 50-50 at best. Judges tend to believe police officers. But with that footage, we've got a solid case. The question is whether they'll try to suppress the evidence or claim the footage doesn't show what we say it shows." Rachel felt her jaw tighten. "So even with proof, this might not work?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to be prepared for every possibility. Can you come by my office this afternoon? I want to see that footage and start building our defense." After hanging up, Rachel went to her car and carefully removed the dashcam's memory card. She made copies on 3 different computers, uploaded one to a secure cloud service, and stored another in a safe deposit box at her bank. She wasn't taking any chances. If Officer Harrison was willing to lie so easily, she had no doubt he'd try to make evidence disappear if he could. Meanwhile, across town at the police station, Officer Derek Harrison was finishing up his official report from the previous night's traffic stop. He sat at his desk, typing with 2 fingers, creating a narrative that had almost nothing to do with reality. According to his report, he had observed Rachel's vehicle traveling at approximately 45 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. He wrote that she had been swerving between lanes, nearly striking a parked car. When he activated his lights, she had allegedly taken several blocks to pull over, behavior consistent with someone trying to hide something. But Harrison didn't stop there. He added that upon approaching the vehicle, he'd noticed Rachel's eyes were bloodshot and glassy. He claimed she had been hostile and argumentative from the first moment, refusing to provide her documents until he asked 3 times. He wrote that she had smelled of alcohol, though he couldn't be certain she was over the legal limit without a test, which she had refused to take. The report went on to describe Rachel as extremely agitated and potentially dangerous. Harrison wrote that she had repeatedly attempted to pull out her cell phone despite his instructions not to. Behavior he interpreted as possible coordination with others or destruction of evidence. He documented confiscating the phone as necessary for the investigation. Harrison added several paragraphs about Rachel's threatening demeanor, claiming she had made aggressive gestures and raised her voice multiple times. He suggested in his report that she might have been under the influence of drugs rather than alcohol, which would explain her erratic behavior and apparent paranoia. The most creative part of his fabrication came near the end, where he wrote that Rachel had claimed to be military personnel in what he described as an apparent attempt to intimidate or influence the traffic stop. He characterized this as suspicious, noting that many people falsely claim military service to avoid tickets or arrest. Harrison concluded his report by recommending prosecution on all charges, stating that Rachel Torres represented the type of aggressive, non-compliant driver who posed a danger to the community. He printed 2 copies, signed them both, and filed one with the department while keeping one for his own records. A week later, Rachel received a notice in the mail. She opened it to find not just information about her court date, but also a copy of Officer Harrison's official police report. As she read through it, her hands began to shake, not with fear but with pure anger at the audacity of these lies. He wrote that I smelled like alcohol, she said aloud to her empty apartment, her voice tight. He wrote that my eyes were bloodshot and that I was swerving all over the road. She called Patricia immediately. "Did you see this report?" "Just got my copy. It's worse than I thought. He's not just exaggerating. He's completely fabricating an entire incident that never happened." "Can he do that? Just lie in an official document?" "He's not supposed to, but it happens more often than you'd think. The problem is this is a sworn statement. If we prove he lied, he's committed perjury. But until then, the prosecutor and the judge will likely believe this report. It's detailed, it's official, and he's a police officer with years of experience and a clean record." That last part hit Rachel hard. "He has a clean record?" "I checked. No complaints filed against him, no disciplinary actions, no problems at all. On paper, he's a model officer. Or he's just never been caught before." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "That's what I'm thinking too. But we need to focus on your case right now. The good news is that his report is so detailed and specific that the dashcam footage will contradict almost every claim. He's backed himself into a corner." Rachel spent the next 2 weeks gathering everything she could. She wrote out a detailed timeline of the traffic stop, noting every moment, every word exchanged. She made sure all her backup copies of the dashcam footage were secure. She even drove the same route at the same time of day, documenting the speed limit signs and road conditions with her temporary phone, since Harrison still had her original. But something else was bothering her. If Harrison was willing to lie this completely about her, how many other people had he done this to? She started doing research, looking through court records for other cases where Harrison had been the arresting or citing officer. What she found disturbed her deeply. Over the past 5 years, Harrison had been involved in over 40 traffic stops that resulted in arrests or citations. She couldn't access all the details without proper legal authorization, but from the public information available, she noticed a pattern. The majority of the people he'd cited or arrested were people of color. Many of the charges involved claims of aggressive behavior, failure to comply, or suspected substance abuse. Rachel printed out everything she could find and brought it to Patricia's office. "I think he's been doing this for years," Rachel said, spreading the documents across Patricia's desk. "Look at these cases. Same types of charges, same language in the reports. I'd bet money that if we could talk to these people, they'd tell us stories similar to mine." Patricia studied the papers, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This could be huge, but we have to be careful. Our focus needs to be on your case. If we start making broader accusations without solid proof, it could hurt your defense. The prosecutor could argue that you're trying to distract from your own violations by attacking the officer's character. But what if I'm not the only one? What if there are people sitting in jail right now because of his lies? I understand your anger, and you're probably right. But the way we help those people is by winning your case first. Once we prove Harrison lied under oath, once we establish a pattern of false reporting, then we can look at his other cases. But if we try to do everything at once, we might end up helping no one." Rachel knew Patricia was right, but it didn't make her feel any better. She kept thinking about all those names on those documents, all those people who might have been innocent, who might have had their lives turned upside down by a cop who felt comfortable lying in official reports. 2 days before the court date, Rachel met with Patricia one final time to prepare. They watched the dashcam footage together for probably the 20th time, noting every contradiction to Harrison's report. "The video is crystal clear," Patricia said. "You were driving normally. Your speed never went above 30. You pulled over immediately when he lit you up. You were polite and cooperative the entire time. Your eyes look tired, sure, but not bloodshot or glassy. There's no smell of alcohol that can be detected on video, obviously. But your behavior shows none of the signs of intoxication he described. So we just play this in court, and he's done? It's not quite that simple. The prosecutor will likely argue about the admissibility of the evidence. They might claim the camera angle doesn't show everything, or that audio doesn't capture your full demeanor, or that the video has been edited. We need to be ready for every objection they might throw at us." "But the truth is the truth," Patricia smiled sadly. "In a perfect world, yes. But in a courtroom, the truth is whatever the judge believes. And judges are human. They make mistakes. They have biases. They sometimes give law enforcement the benefit of the doubt even when they shouldn't." Rachel felt a knot forming in her stomach. "So even with video proof, I might lose?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to be prepared for a fight. Harrison is going to testify under oath that his report is accurate. When we show the video contradicts him, He'll have to either admit he lied or double down and claim the video doesn't tell the whole story. Either way, it won't look good for him. But prosecutors don't like admitting their officers made mistakes. They'll fight hard to defend him. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep again. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the upcoming court date. She thought about revealing who she really was, walking into that courtroom in her Navy uniform with all her medals and ribbons. She outranked most of the military officers on base. She'd served her country with distinction for 15 years. She'd earned respect through blood, sweat, and determination, but that wasn't the point, was it? The point was that she shouldn't need to be a high-ranking military officer to get justice. Any ordinary citizen should be able to expect honesty from law enforcement. Any person, regardless of their job or status or background, should be able to drive down a suburban street without being targeted with false charges. She decided to keep her identity quiet. She'd go to court in civilian clothes, just another defendant fighting traffic tickets. She wanted to see how the system would treat her as an ordinary person. She wanted to see if Harrison would lie under oath as easily as he'd lied in his report. And most importantly, she wanted a record of his perjury, clear and undeniable, so that when the truth came out, there could be no excuses. On the morning of her court date, Rachel got dressed in simple business casual clothes, dark slacks and a plain blouse. She looked at herself in the mirror. No uniform, no rank insignia, no indication that she was anything other than a civilian fighting an unfair traffic ticket. She met Patricia at the courthouse steps. Her lawyer looked her over and nodded approvingly. "You look perfect. Calm, professional, non-threatening. Let's go prove this cop is a liar." As they walked through the courthouse doors, Rachel felt the weight of what was about to happen. In a few hours, Officer Harrison would have to choose between telling the truth and admitting he'd filed a false report, or doubling down on his lies under oath. She was betting he'd choose the lies. People who'd gotten away with dishonesty for years rarely stopped on their own, and when he made that choice, when he committed perjury in open court, Rachel would be ready. She had the evidence. She had the truth. And soon she'd have justice. Not just for herself, but hopefully for everyone else Harrison had wronged over the years. The courtroom was already filling with people when they arrived. Rachel spotted Harrison sitting with the prosecutor, looking confident and relaxed. He hadn't recognized her yet, probably didn't even remember what she looked like. She was just another case to him, another citation, another day at work. But she remembered everything about him, every lie, every false accusation, every illegal action. And in a few short hours, everyone in this courtroom would know the truth. The courtroom smelled of old wood and stale coffee. Rachel sat at the defense table next to Patricia, watching as people filed in for the morning session. There were about 30 cases scheduled that day, everything from parking violations to more serious traffic offenses. She was number 12 on the docket. Judge Martin Brewster entered right at 9 o'clock and everyone stood. He was an older man, probably in his mid-60s, with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked tired already and the day had just begun. This was the kind of judge who'd probably seen thousands of traffic cases over the years, and Rachel wondered if they all just blended together for him after a while. The first 11 cases went quickly. Most people pleaded guilty and paid their fines. A couple tried to argue, but the judge wasn't particularly sympathetic. Rachel noticed he seemed to believe the police officers without question, barely glancing at the defendants as they tried to explain their side of things. Then her case was called. The People versus Rachel Torres. Rachel and Patricia stood and approached the defense table. From across the courtroom, Officer Harrison moved to the witness stand, and that's when he finally looked at her. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, recognition maybe, or calculation. But his confident expression didn't change. He raised his right hand and was sworn in. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Harrison said firmly, settling into the witness chair like he'd done 100 times before. The prosecutor, a young woman named Amanda Bishop who couldn't have been more than 30, approached with a notepad. "Officer Harrison, can you describe the events of the evening in question?" Harrison cleared his throat and began his testimony. Rachel felt her hands clench under the table as he spoke. "On the evening of September 23rd, I was on patrol in the Meadowbrook neighborhood when I observed a silver sedan traveling at a high rate of speed on Maple Street. I clocked the vehicle at approximately 45 miles per hour in a posted 30-mile-per-hour zone. Lie number 1, Rachel thought. I also observed the vehicle swerving between lanes and nearly striking a parked car on the right side of the street, Harrison continued. Based on this erratic driving behavior, I initiated a traffic stop. Lie number 2 and 3. The vehicle took several blocks to pull over, which raised my suspicions. When I approached the driver's side window, I immediately noticed that the driver, Ms. Torres, appeared to have bloodshot, glassy eyes. There was also a smell of alcohol coming from the vehicle. Rachel felt Patricia's hand briefly touch her arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. She took a slow breath and kept her expression neutral. Ms. Torres was immediately hostile and argumentative, Harrison said, warming to his story now. When I asked for her license and registration, she refused to provide them, instead questioning why I had pulled her over. I had to ask 3 times before she finally complied. The prosecutor nodded along, writing notes. Judge Brewster was paying attention now, his eyes moving between Harrison and Rachel. I asked Ms. Torres to step out of the vehicle for a field sobriety evaluation. Given my suspicion that she might be under the influence, she became increasingly agitated at this point, raising her voice and making aggressive gestures. This was so far from the truth that Rachel almost couldn't believe she was hearing it. She'd been nothing but polite and calm the entire time. But Harrison wasn't done. Ms. Torres repeatedly attempted to pull out her cell phone despite my clear instructions not to do so. When I asked her what she was doing, she stated she was going to record me, which I believed was an attempt to obstruct my investigation or possibly coordinate with others. Given her aggressive behavior and failure to comply with lawful orders, I confiscated the phone as evidence. And how would you characterize the defendant's overall demeanor during this interaction? The prosecutor asked. Harrison looked directly at Rachel, his expression serious. In my 15 years of law enforcement, I've encountered many difficult individuals. Ms. Torres was one of the most uncooperative and potentially dangerous. Her behavior was consistent with someone under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and her refusal to comply with simple lawful orders suggested consciousness of guilt. At one point, she even claimed to be military personnel, which I interpreted as an attempt to intimidate me or influence the stop. Judge Brewster leaned forward slightly. She claimed to be in the military? Yes, Your Honor. When I asked what she did for work, she stated she worked at the base and was in the Navy. Given her behavior and demeanor, I found this claim questionable, as it appeared to be an attempt to leverage false authority. Rachel felt her face grow hot, but she maintained her composure. Patricia squeezed her arm again gently. The prosecutor continued. Officer Harrison, you filed a comprehensive report about this incident. Is that report accurate to the best of your knowledge? Yes, it is. Every detail in that report reflects exactly what I observed and experienced that evening. And you stand by your decision to issue citations for reckless driving, speeding, and failure to comply with a lawful order? Absolutely. Ms. Torres's behavior that evening warranted those citations and more. Honestly, I showed considerable restraint in not arresting her on the spot. Thank you, Officer Harrison. No further questions. The prosecutor returned to her seat looking satisfied. Judge Brewster turned to Patricia. Does the defense wish to cross-examine? Patricia stood, buttoning her suit jacket. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. She approached Officer Harrison with a calm, measured pace. Rachel had seen Patricia in action before, but watching her work in a courtroom was different. She looked completely in control. Officer Harrison, you've testified that Ms. Torres was traveling at 45 miles per hour in a 30 zone. Is that correct? That's correct. And you clocked this speed with your radar? Yes. Can you provide the radar reading documentation? Harrison shifted slightly. That's standard procedure, but I didn't save the specific reading for this particular stop. However, I'm trained and certified in radar operation, and I'm confident in my assessment. Patricia made a note on her pad. I see. Now you also testified that Ms. Torres was swerving between lanes. Can you describe exactly what you observed? She was weaving back and forth, crossing the center line and then moving toward parked cars on the right side of the street. And did she strike any vehicles or objects during this alleged swerving? No, but she came close several times. How close? Within a foot or two. Patricia nodded slowly. You also mentioned that it took several blocks for Ms. Torres to pull over. How many blocks exactly? Harrison thought for a moment. I'd say 3 or 4 blocks. And during those 3 or 4 blocks, did Ms. Torres increase her speed or attempt to evade you? No, but the delay itself was suspicious. Or could she have been looking for a safe place to pull over? That's not how I interpreted it. Patricia walked back to the defense table and picked up a folder. Officer Harrison, you testified that when you approached the vehicle you smelled alcohol. Is that correct? Yes. And you noted in your report that Ms. Torres had bloodshot, glassy eyes? That's right. Did you administer a field sobriety test? I attempted to, but she refused. Did you offer her a breathalyzer test? Harrison paused. No, I did not. Why not if you suspected she was driving under the influence? Based on her aggressive behavior, I determined it was safer to issue citations and let the court handle it. So you suspected someone of drunk driving, but you didn't administer the standard test that would prove whether she was actually intoxicated? Her behavior made it clear she wouldn't cooperate. Patricia let that answer hang in the air for a moment. Officer Harrison, you've testified that Ms. Torres was hostile, aggressive, and uncooperative from the very beginning. Is that your testimony? Yes, it is. You also stated she raised her voice at you? Multiple times, and made aggressive gestures? Yes. Can you describe these aggressive gestures? Harrison shifted in his seat. She moved her hands in a threatening manner, pointed at me, that sort of thing. Did she ever threaten you verbally? Not in so many words, but her tone was clearly threatening. So to be clear, she never actually threatened you with words, but you felt threatened by her tone and hand movements? Yes. Patricia walked back to the defense table again, this time picking up her laptop. Your Honor, at this time the defense would like to submit evidence. The judge gestured for her to proceed. Patricia connected her laptop to the courtroom's display system. Officer Harrison, you've testified under oath that everything in your report is accurate and that your testimony here today reflects the truth of what happened that evening. Is that correct? Yes, it is. And you're certain about this? You want to stand by this testimony? Harrison looked slightly annoyed now. I've been a police officer for 15 years. I know how to file an accurate report and provide truthful testimony. Yes, I stand by everything I've said. Your Honor, Patricia said, turning to the judge. We'd like to submit dashcam footage from Ms. Torres's vehicle. The footage includes both video and audio from the entire traffic stop in question. The prosecutor jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. We weren't informed that video evidence existed. We disclosed this evidence 48 hours ago as required. Patricia replied calmly. I have the email confirmation right here. Judge Brewster looked at the prosecutor. Do you have any other grounds for objection? The prosecutor glanced at Officer Harrison, whose face had gone slightly pale. No, Your Honor. Then the objection is overruled. Let's see this footage. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly and the video began to play on the large screen. Everyone could see Rachel's car driving down Maple Street. The speedometer was clearly visible in the corner of the frame, showing a steady 30 miles per hour. The car stayed centered in its lane, no swerving. No erratic behavior. When the police lights appeared in the rearview mirror, the video showed Rachel immediately activating her turn signal and pulling over within half a block. Not 3 or 4 blocks as Harrison had testified. The audio kicked in as Harrison approached the window. License and registration. His voice came through clearly. Of course, officer. They're in my glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now. Rachel's calm voice responded. The entire courtroom listened as the real conversation unfolded, so different from Harrison's testimony. Rachel's voice remained polite and even throughout. There was no hostility, no raised voice, no aggressive behavior. Her eyes on the video looked tired, but certainly not bloodshot or glassy. When Officer Harrison ordered her out of the vehicle and she complied immediately, several people in the courtroom exchanged glances. When the audio captured Harrison refusing to let her record and confiscating her phone despite her calm requests, Judge Brewster's expression hardened. The video ran for 8 minutes, contradicting virtually every claim Harrison had made. When it ended, the courtroom was silent. Judge Brewster removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he looked at Officer Harrison, his voice was cold. Officer Harrison, I've just watched video evidence that contradicts almost every aspect of your testimony. Would you like to revise your statement? Harrison's jaw worked, but no words came out at first. Finally, he said, the video doesn't show everything. It doesn't capture the full situation. The video shows the defendant driving safely at the speed limit. It shows her pulling over immediately. It shows her being polite and cooperative. It shows her eyes looking perfectly normal, and the audio clearly demonstrates that she never raised her voice or behaved aggressively. What exactly doesn't it show, officer? She was still being difficult, Your Honor. The camera angle doesn't capture her full demeanor. Her demeanor seemed perfectly appropriate to me. The judge's voice was getting harder. Officer Harrison, you've just committed perjury in my courtroom. The words hung in the courtroom like a thunderclap. Officer Harrison's face went from pale to red, his hands gripping the arms of the witness chair. The prosecutor looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor, and Judge Brewster stared at Harrison with an expression that made it clear this wasn't just another traffic case anymore. Your Honor, I object to that characterization, Harrison said, his voice tight. I testified to what I observed and experienced.
If the video shows something different, then perhaps the angle or the recording quality? Officer Harrison, Judge Brewster interrupted, his voice sharp.
I have eyes and ears. That video was perfectly clear. You testified under oath that Ms. Torres was speeding. The video shows her speedometer at exactly 30 miles per hour. You testified she was swerving between lanes. The video shows her driving in a perfectly straight line. You testified she was hostile and raised her voice. The audio proves she was nothing but polite and calm. Which part of that is a matter of camera angle? Harrison opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the prosecutor, who was frantically flipping through papers, probably trying to find some legal ground to stand on. Patricia stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may, there's one more thing the court should know about my client. Rachel felt her heart speed up. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. Patricia had asked her permission earlier that morning, and Rachel had agreed. It was time. Your Honor, Patricia continued, my client has been sitting here quietly, allowing herself to be accused of crimes she didn't commit. She's listened to Officer Harrison claim she was dangerous, uncooperative, and possibly intoxicated. She's heard him mock her military service, suggesting she was lying about it to intimidate him. I think it's time the court learned exactly who Rachel Torres is. Patricia nodded to Rachel, who stood up slowly. She reached into her bag and pulled out her military identification card, walking it up to the judge's bench. Patricia took it and handed it to Judge Brewster. The judge looked at the ID, then at Rachel, then back at the ID. His eyebrows went up. Lieutenant Commander? Yes, Your Honor, Rachel said, speaking for the first time since the hearing began. Her voice was steady and clear. I'm a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. I've served for 15 years with 3 combat deployments. I'm currently assigned as a training officer at the naval base. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Officer Harrison's face went through several shades of color, finally settling on a sickly gray. The prosecutor put her head in her hands. And not just any training officer, Patricia added. Commander Torres is a Navy SEAL. She's one of the few women to achieve that rank in one of the most elite special operations forces in the world. She holds top-secret security clearance and has received multiple commendations for valor and service. Judge Brewster leaned back in his chair, studying Rachel with new interest. Commander Torres, why didn't you identify yourself during the traffic stop? Rachel had practiced this answer, but she still took a moment to make sure she got it right. Your Honor, I didn't think I should have to. I'm an American citizen driving on a public street. My military service shouldn't matter. What should matter is that I was following the law, being respectful and doing nothing wrong. I wanted to be treated the way any citizen should be treated.